Hey everybody, Gromos here with some more Was on the footage, and this is my second simulator battle video, for planes at least. I played a few more of the simulator battle events last week, mostly the Escort IL-2 and Sicily event, and I thought I'd show you a bit of footage from it and give you a few more impressions and thoughts on it so far. And also, since it was kind of requested, I show you my first match in simulator mode with the BF109 G-2. I also played around a bit with my track IR settings this time, after getting some tips after the last video. I increased the smoothness a bit, though I think I will play around a bit more with the settings, especially the death zone settings. Also, I try to have the camera a bit further back now to get a better field of view, so thanks for those tips on track IR settings. Now, a few thoughts on the events after flying some more of them last week. Now, I still think that events are currently the way to go in simulator battle mode, at least for me, for the reasons I already talked about last time. They just provide full games and more action, it seems, and matchups you often don't get in the normal battle queue. And while I do have a blast flying them in simulator battle mode, there is one thing that I think could certainly be a bit improved for them, and that has to do with balancing. Now, I am of course still very new to simulator battle events, so correct me if I'm wrong, but at least in the events that I have flown so far, it did seem like a team with more planes usually had the upper hand. Now, as you probably know, in the event mode, the events usually have a more historically accurate lineup of planes you can use in them, but also often uneven team sizes. I guess in an attempt to balance better planes on one side with having more planes on the other side. Anyway, I think that while that sounds like a good idea in theory, it can be a bit of a problem, and the reason is something I have also mentioned last time. The pure performance of a plane is in my opinion not as much of a deciding factor than it is for example in realistic battle mode, and I think the events are more balanced with realistic battles in mind. So there are differences in team sizes where they are not necessarily needed, or they are bigger than they need to be. The IL-2 escort mission was a good example in my opinion. One team had a maximum of 11 players, the other one 16, a difference of 5 planes, and I think a 2-plane difference would have been more than enough for this particular event. So the balancing for the events could use some more work. But again, I only tried a few yet and I'm new to the mode. Despite that though, I have a blast with them, even when flying in the outnumbered team, so I think I will keep focusing on the events for now. That means that the simulator battle videos will most likely feature multiple planes, instead of focusing on one or two as I have done in the past, simply because the events are of course different every day, so I don't know what I get to fly the next time, and I can't really just focus on one of the plane per video, most of the time anyway. In general, I am at the moment of course focusing on the basics of the game mode, getting used to it and trying what I can or cannot do in it, so don't expect any amazing tactics or even tutorials yet. I need to get a lot better at the game mode before I do that. I am still in the testing things out phase, but I think flying in simulator battle mode still looks nice and is worth showing in a video. And I hope you agree with me. Now, one thing I got asked the last time on Reddit was my opinion on the spotting system. Now, I would like to wait till I have more experience for a more detailed answer, but to give you a preliminary opinion on the topic. What I don't want to see in simulator battle mode is icons for enemy planes. I think the ones for friendly planes are okay, but I feel having them for enemy planes would be immersion breaking. However, I do see of course that planes in War Thunder often have a tendency of blending in with the terrain and being hard to see, more so than in other similar games maybe. That is certainly a part of the game mode where there is still room for improvement, but I don't think it should be done via icons for enemy planes. Rather some improvements of the way the planes are rendered at a certain distance. Now, I am not an expert in 3D rendering, so I don't really know what the options would be here, but I am sure there are some changes to the LODs, or maybe make the planes a little bit brighter than the terrain they fly over. I don't think it's a huge issue, but there is room for improvement. Now, I assume this problem, as well as the event balancing I talked about first, might not get quite the attention it may deserve, and the reason is of course that the simulator battle mode is played by a lot less people than the other two game modes. Which is a pity, Now that I tried it myself, I know what I was missing out on. I do hope though that the simulator battle crowd will get bigger in the future. I have high hopes that the ground forces bring in more players, for example. That was one reason why I finally gave it a try. I played tanks in simulator mode, so I figured it might do it for planes as well. I hope that others have a similar idea and increase the player base for sim battles. For tanks, the sim part of the game has already a much bigger percentage of the player base than in the plane part of the game. And I of course also hope that my videos might convince a few people to maybe give it a try. And because of that I thought I might try to give you a few basic tips for people new to simulator battles. Nothing too detailed yet, since I'm new to the mode myself. I might make a more detailed video specifically about that once I have the experience to do so. But for now I thought I'd just give you a few hints if you want to give simulator battles a try. The first thing of course is to just go out there and try it. I know it can be a bit scary starting from basically zero once you are already good in another game mode. Not many people want to go back to being the new guy, and that was the case for me and one reason why I did not go for simulator battles for so long. But now I think it is absolutely worth it. Now, since most people in realistic battle play with mouse aim, I assume this would be the first time for most people to play with a joystick and having to deal with stalling aircraft and things like that. So first a few thoughts on if you need a joystick and what kind. Now, for the joystick I would recommend using one, however I don't think it's 100% necessary to have one. There are quite a few people out there that play with mouse and mouse joy and do well with it, so it is certainly possible. But in the end, a stick is just better suited for flying a plane, and for me at least it simply adds immersion on top of that. So it is up to you. I don't think it is absolutely necessary, but probably improves the experience. Now, for the type of joystick, I am of the opinion that a good mid-level stick is good enough, and an expensive hotter setup, while certainly adding to the immersion and coolness factor, won't give you a real advantage. I still use my Logitech joystick, which last I checked cost about 30 bucks on Amazon. Something around that price range is good enough in my opinion. If you buy one, just make sure it has a proper twist handle for the rudder, otherwise accuracy will suffer in the yaw axis. Now, about flying. One thing you have to probably get used to if you're new to simulator battles is to maneuver the plane without stalling it, especially on planes with higher wing loading. Now, I would recommend training that simply in test flights. Just take off and have a nice joyride around the map, look for a suitable obstacle course, and just have a fun stunt flying session, like I do here. I think that is a fun way to train and get used to the handling of the plane, and how far you can go without stalling, and get a feel for when you are about to do so. I actually think that doing that is quite enjoyable. Picking a bridge or an industrial site with a lot of cranes and chimneys, fly through them as cool looking as you can manage, and then turn around as tight as you can without stalling and do it again. I think that's a fun way to learn how to fly. And avoiding the stall is in my opinion easier in simulator battle mode than it was in realistic battle, because you get more feedback in the cockpit view, more of a sound, the shake from the buffeting that comes before the stall, for example. You can also combine those exercises with some gunnery practice. Just pick targets randomly, like trees or buildings, and try to hit them. You can of course also use the mission editor to fly against some AI to get some practice, but keep in mind that those AIs do behave a little weird and are in my opinion not that fun to fight against. I prefer just stunt flying in a normal test flight. You should also know how to recover from a spin if you do stall the plane, though not all the planes in War Thunder will enter a spin yet. There is a tutorial about that in War Thunder, but the basic procedure usually is to move the throttle to 0, neutralize the stick, so just keep it centered in the middle, and give full rudder to the opposite side you are spinning. Wait till you exit the spin and your nose is pointing down, gain some speed and pull out. Now, another thing you might want to get a feel for is bombing on planes without a bomb sight, since it is a different point of view than in realistic battles, which might need some getting used to. I would also do that in test flights, but in realistic battle mode while flying with simulator battle controls in cockpit view. The reason is that realistic battle mode lets you use the bomb camera, and that is, in my opinion, important to get accurate with those bombs. You can see exactly how much you missed and correct on the next time. It is harder to get better at aiming bombs if you don't clearly see where they landed after you dropped them. That is, by the way, also the reason why I usually don't use stealth ammo for my guns. I think gunnery is a skill you never stop improving at. There are so many angles from which you can fire in so many different situations, and I think there is always room for improvement here. And if you fire at the target with tracers, it is a learning experience every time. If you miss your shots, you can see where and by how much you missed in this situation, and that in turn will eventually increase your feeling for the correct lead in all those different situations. Now, that were a few basic tips on how to train if new to simulator battle mode. As I have said, I might make a proper beginner's guide in the future when I have the necessary experience. Well, let's take a look at the fight in the 109 G-2 during the Sicily event. Now, I haven't flown this plane in almost a year, but it was requested in the comments that I fly a 109, so I figured I might as well show you this fight. Now, I like the way the G-2 flies and handles, but one thing I had a real problem with was the visibility to the rear, which is awful. Mid-level 109s have a huge armor plate behind the pilot, which really reduces the visibility to the rear. On later 109s this plate was redesigned to improve visibility. Now I saw some gunfire near the spotter planes on Sicily and moved that way, and I see a twin-engine fighter lower to my right, and I think it might be a P-38. But then it looks more like a BF110, maybe an AI spotter plane going down. But a new plane shows up to my front, also a twin, and this one is a P-38 for sure. I want to get behind and below him in his blind spot, I hope, and then attack from below while pulling up. I am getting closer a bit faster than I thought though, and while I do get a few good hits in, I overshoot after that. I look back and try to see where the P-38 went, but all I see is armor plate. That is of course something I still need to get used to a bit. Overshooting never bothered me much in realistic battle mode, because you can't lose sight of an opponent, so all I needed to do in realistic battle is pull up, barrel roll around and come back down on his tail, no problem. But here I was a bit worried because I could not see him anymore. Thankfully I think the P-38 never quite saw me either, and he is coming back down in front of me, apparently damaged. If that is even the same P-38 I initially attacked, which I'm not entirely sure about. A P-24 passed below me and you could see a few tracers flying past me from him, but I want to get back on the tail of the P-38. He seems to have a damaged engine, but he still might be able to outrun me in a dive. I again try to approach below him in his blind spot, and while I get closer I can see another plane in front of the P-38, looks like a single engine plane. The P-38 looks like he might want to attack him, so I figure he might be friendly. Another option is that he is also enemy and the P-38 thinks it's me. I never quite saw this guy well enough to be sure, but I think it might have been a P-40. In any case, I don't think he noticed us. And I get some more hits on the P-38 after getting close to him again, and a large part falls off his tail, looks like the elevator, and he goes down in a dive after that. At this point I assume he has no elevator and will most likely go down anyway, and I fire just a few machine gun bullets after him to make sure. I actually think at this point that I'm making a mistake losing all my altitude here, and I should break off since he will go down anyway. But then it seems he is recovering from his dive, so I figure he does still have an elevator and I need some more hits to get him, so I stay on him. With hindsight, his elevator was probably really gone and he just started to pull up because he got fast enough the plane was doing it on its own, but I did not think about that at this point. So I stay on his tail to get some more hits on him. I fire mostly machine guns and only short bursts of cannon in between to conserve some ammo, and eventually his plane stalls and he's going down. Now after that, I at first move a bit towards the enemy base while climbing back, and then back towards the action. The idea is that this way I might be able to surprise an enemy plane because I'm coming from the wrong direction. As I am on my way back towards the middle of the map, I can spot another plane at my about 1 o'clock position a little lower, so I keep an eye on him while I get closer till I can see what it is. I in those cases try to not fly straight at them, but a bit to the side, so I can keep my altitude up while observing through the side window. If I would fly straight at him, I would either have to put the nose down or lose sight of him. As I get closer, I can see that it is another P-38. So what I want to do is pass above him, dive down behind him, and approach in his blind spot and attack from below again. However, the P-38 is in a slight dive, pretty fast and losing altitude, so instead of ending up below him, I end up right behind him. But he has not seen me and I get a good hit on him. Now he breaks to the left and I come around to get back on him. The P-38 stalls though, and I try to get a shot at him while he is spinning to make sure he goes down, but I don't quite get it. Now I know we are pretty high and he has some space to recover from the spin, but I can see some more gunfire below me, so there's probably a friendly plane in trouble. So I just hope the P-38 goes down and I try to see what is going on below me. I can't quite see them though. And I don't get a kill message for the P-38 either. So I look to the left to see what the P-38 is doing, and just in time to see a second P-38 and a P-40 come in from the side. I turn into them to throw off their aim and try to get behind them. As they pass me, I go up in a high yo-yo turn and go after the P-38 that is now lower than me. The lightning keeps turning and is soon passing in front of me again, and I go up in a second high yo-yo as he passes in front of me. That is sufficient to get me on the lightning's tail as I come down again, and if he would have kept up the turn I would have most likely gotten him, but he instead does the right thing, levels out and flies away. I, on the other hand, make the mistake of sticking with him. I hope I might be able to get close enough to get him out of the fight, but he is too far. And as tracers fly past my window and I take a hit, I have to break off and evade. The maneuver costs some energy and I am now pretty low on altitude, and the armor plate to my rear gives me trouble again. I have problems spotting the threat at first. But then I see a P-40 coming in from the side, followed by another plane that I couldn't quite identify and the P-38. I turn into them and then reverse and turn the other side. I can see the P-40 to my right and I turn after him and hope I get a shot at him. But again I focus on him for too long, which gives the P-38 the opportunity to get into fire position behind me. I try to evade again, but this time I'm not fast enough to really pull out of the P-38's sides, and this is the end of this adventure. Well, that was the first match in a BF109 in simulator battle mode. Certainly not an example for proper decision making, but I did enjoy the fight nonetheless. It would have been better for me if I would have just pulled up right after the P-38 start at the beginning and re-evaluated the situations from higher altitude. But then again, I am new to simulator battle mode and I am for the most part just training the basics and test out what I can do and what I cannot do. As for the plane, I did enjoy the G-2. It flies very well and seems to be a very good plane, a good mix of energy retention and the ability to still be able to turn somewhat well. The visibility to the rear is pretty bad though. The later 109s with the redesigned armor plate are much better, as are the A-mails which don't have this plate at all. This is a nice example for how things matter in simulator battle mode that I did not pay that much attention to in the past. If I read about different 109 variants, for example, the thing that I would focus on would be things like engine power, armament and power to weight ratio. And a redesigned armor plate in the rear of the pilot would not be more than a footnote. Yet, now this is the thing I look forward to the most when I get to try the G6 in an event. I did also try the 190 on Sicily, certainly a good plane and the visibility is much better than for the 109. Still, I was never that big of a fan of heavy wing-loading fighters, and I assume playing in simulator battle mode will not really change that. Well, and that's it for this video. As always, I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.